morning, ladies. Good afternoon and morning. Welcome.
Good afternoon and morning. So, I want to know, how recently did someone tell you that you looked like someone famous?
I never get that. I always look like someone's cousin. You remind me so much of my cousin, or like, oh, a friend of mine from college. I'm always the friend. I'm always a friend. Never a famous
That is
person.
funny. No one tells me I look like a famous person. Not no one. Years and years and years ago, someone said Ashley Tyndall. Tisdale.
Yes,
Oh.
that's so great. I don't see it at
She's like
all.
15 and blonde.
I did one time get someone said, "You remind me of Katherine Heigl." And so I was like, "Oh, the essence of her? That's funny." Like,
I like the essence.
I was like, "That's so
I
funny."
get that
They're
makes
like, "You
sense.
remind me of that actress." So I was like, "Oh, that's funny because we do not look alike, but I guess our
That is really
mannerisms
cute.
in that person's eyes were similar."
Micah, you have a doppelganger. And what is the name of the movie? I'm trying to find her name, the actress, and you might know, but what is the name of the movie, the Adam Sandler movie where he raises a kid?
Oh, Big Daddy.
Is it called Big Daddy? Okay.
I never saw that movie. I don't know my doppelganger there.
Okay, who do you get told though?
So get told is a interesting phrase because I haven't gotten told in about 15 years. Once I started looking like a woman who was aging a little bit, then I was not
I was no
anymore.
longer told.
Um, it was like a very generic, like, "You remind me of that movie star with blonde hair and a round nose and blue eyes."
Like
And you're like,
every
"Well,
movie star.
there's a few of those." So, yeah, I have a generic
I
round
could
nose,
see
blonde lady
lady face.
face.
I could see, the mom, Dumpy. What was the mom's name from Modern
Oh,
Family?
Claire
Yeah, I could
Dunphy.
see an essence of
Yeah.
that
Okay,
Okay.
Modern
okay.
Family mom.
Yeah.
Okay, this actress is Joey Lauren Adams. So think
Oh.
of the movie. She's the absolute most darling. What else has she been in? You would know who she is. You have like
Me
Okay,
a
I'm gonna
too.
look her up.
similar look. Joey
Joey
Lauren Adams. At least in Big Daddy,
Lauren.
she's the cutest of all time.
Oh, I have seen her in. Oh, this is
Adams.
an honor.
Joey.
Oh,
She's
no, she's starting to
lovely. Oh, is she not good?
No, it just a sound, all of a sudden a video came on, and
Oh,
it was loud.
this
Yes,
is her
and
in
I
the
had that
movie.
same haircut in
Mhm.
2000 no,
Yes.
in 1999, I think I
I
had that
could see
haircut.
that.
No, Micah, this is you. Well, and that's Catherine. Do you ever get Renee Zellweger?
I could see Renee.
Mhm.
Back then, back in the day,
Do you
The
have a
day.
round nose?
before
Anyway,
Renee had plastic
Oh,
face
yeah, I
and
know, right? Plastic face.
no, you are totally Joey Lauren Adams and Renee Zellweger.
Okay.
This is you.
I see it 100%.
Wow, you guys,
And in the movie
thanks.
Big Daddy, her
Yeah.
mannerisms even, like, she's just so lovely and darling, and you just wanna be her friend.
Oh,
That's you, Micah. And
Heather.
Mercedes, you remind me of
I
my
know,
cousin.
right? Heather, there is no one else like you.
Just us. Have
You are
you guys
just you.
okay, this is a funny thing. That's just me.
Oh my gosh.
This is a funny thing when you live in LA that you see famous people often places, but I
I can't
can't
either.
place them. So it's like, "Oh my gosh. Oh, I know you." And I've actually said this to people. Like there was a guy on the one of the actors from Parenthood. I don't know anybody's names either, so I'm not helpful in that regard. But he's in Parenthood, and I had been watching this was back when I was watching Parenthood, and I saw him at a park in LA, and he's just walking, and I was made eye contact, like, "Oh my gosh, hi," thinking, we graduated high school together, or we went to college, like, I know you, and then it clicked, and I, like, just kept walking. I was so embarrassed, like, oh, he probably gets that all the time, but when you see a famous person out of context, totally
Yes.
recognize them. But like,
Yeah,
"Oh,
you
how do
don't
I
go
know
to
you? How do I know you?"
famous,
Unless it's
like,
like
movie star, you think cash register,
Yeah.
Trader Joe's cash register guy, or like
Yeah, totally.
high school.
Mine is always like, I think we
We
went to
took that
college
night
together.
class. I think he was in night class at college.
Yeah. Oh no, I've spent every
Yeah.
Thursday with you for the last 5 years watching you on the
I
show.
love that you just said hi first. I feel like anytime I see someone from my past, my first instinct is just like hide behind the clothes, go around the corner. There's a plant I can squat behind.
That is funny. That is
Good for
funny.
you.
My instinct is always a hug, and it's really been awkward sometimes. I'm like, we are not that close, but I feel like we knew each other when we were young, so that means something.
That is so funny.
Oh, well, I'm glad we figured this out,
I
everybody.
know that
We
you're the only
figured it
famous
out.
person. I'm glad we
The only one with a
But
doppelganger.
Mercedes does remind me of my
Yes,
cousin.
right? Or a friend you had in college.
Okay. Well, enough of this. Let's shout some worth and shift some narratives for people with Down syndrome. Today, my ladies, and all our listeners out there, we are diving into one of our favorite topics, inclusion. And I'm excited about this. We're chatting about our opinions on the barriers and challenges that can sometimes prevent inclusion from happening for all. This is a conversation you don't want to miss. So, welcome to the Lucky Few podcast.
Okay, everybody listening, guess what is happening on
Oh
March
my gosh.
8th
Something special.
in San Diego, California. There's going to be a live event. That is right. Micah, Mercedes, and Heather from the
Woo!
Lucky Few podcast. That's us. We're going to be together in person in San Diego, California. Why, friends? Why are we doing this? Everybody?
Because we like you.
We do.
And because we are celebrating the fact that we've had 1 million downloads.
1
What?
million downloads. What are we going to do? Show up on our computers? No.
No, we're not.
We're going to get together in real life.
I need to see your face.
We're going to do a little toast.
Yes.
There is going to be alcohol at the
What?
event,
Are
friends.
we adults
That's
or
right.
what?
The
boy.
party. And it's in San Diego, and tickets are on sale right now. Okay, listeners, this is going to be worth it to come. Okay, tickets are they're $21. If you can't make it, we're also doing a virtual ticket. There's only 40 tickets.
How many?
It is a small, intimate venue. There's 40
Oh my
seats.
gosh.
So, hop on that online. Where do you go to buy
That's
it?
Run, don't walk.
Run, don't walk. luckyfewpodcast.com. Hit that link. Get your ticket today. Invite your girlfriend
Fun.
and your neighbor. Date night. However you want to do it. It's going to be amazing. Woo! We'll see you there.
Okay, friends, I'm so excited to read one of our wonderful reviews from a listener named Emily. Emily says, such wonderful content on their podcasts and pages. Warm, friendly hosts who share the true perspectives and joy of the Down syndrome community. Thank you, Emily. That's so kind. And I love that you called us warm. I feel like we're warm. So I'm glad that's coming off that way and not, I don't know, difficult. What was we did an
Cold and difficult. Bitter.
Are we difficult advocates? Difficult or advocates?
Oh, we already did that episode.
So I'm happy that we're warm. You make me happy, Emily, and I think you're warm. Okay, friends, don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. And now you can leave us a review under any new episode on Spotify. We love reading these and appreciate your support.
Yes and amen. Okay, this conversation, y'all, one thing that that we had been talking about. We like to like bring things up in our little group podcast chat, and then some things make it to episodes, some things don't. But something that we really wanted to touch on is that the woman in Spain with Down
Mhm.
syndrome who was elected to the parliament. Did I get all
Mhm.
that correct? The
Yes.
first woman with Down syndrome to serve in that capacity. Mar Gal Saran. Did I
Yeah.
say that
I think
right?
you
Pretty
said it
good.
right.
That's
I
how I
mean,
would say it.
I don't yeah,
Gal
Galceran.
Saran. Mar. We're gonna call her Mar. Well, I feel like we should
Miss
call her
Scott,
Miss
Miss
yeah.
Galtron, right?
yeah,
Maybe.
Or sorry, we're gonna be a
Miss
little
G.
more Miss G. There you go. Oh gosh, you guys are
I
making it
know.
worse. We
It's not true.
honor you. But this is an interesting. Okay, for me, there's different
Mm.
layers to this, and bless all of our hearts, I am an
Mhm.
external processor. So here we go, everybody.
Okay.
I first of all, first and foremost, huge
Mhm.
celebration. This is so exciting, and I think you probably could relate to this, ladies. When these kinds of news stories come out, I get them text to me, emailed to me, in
Yeah.
my DMs, tagged in stories, and I love it. I think it's amazing, and I love that people would assume that I want to celebrate that because I a million percent want to, and this is incredible. And then it brings up this conversation of what we celebrate and what we don't celebrate.
Mm.
And then it brings up like what kind of person with Down syndrome gets to be celebrated. And then it's like, well, what kind of human gets to be celebrated? And it all gets a little bit
Mm.
tricky
Mhm.
and mucky. And it doesn't, I first want to say though, it doesn't take away from the
Mhm.
celebration for this woman for a second for me. And so that's kind of where the conversation, the springboard of this idea and this topic of inclusion being a privilege or not comes from. One more thing to note, and then I really want to hear you guys' thoughts. That we are talking always from a Western
Mm.
perspective is my
Mhm.
perspective. So I don't know outside of like a Western view. I can't speak
Mhm.
clearly to inclusion and privilege outside of my Western context. So I just need
Mhm.
to say that too. That's my first thoughts, ladies. What do you
Yeah.
got?
Okay. Okay. Well, let's just give a little bit
Yeah.
of background
Give me
into Mar Galceran. She was recently elected an assembly member, a regional assembly member in parliament in Spain. And she has, for the past 20 years, worked as a civil servant in Valencia. So she has been in government work all of her adulthood and has been running or at the the things that we're reading about her life. She was at the helm for 4 years of Asendown, a Valencian organization dedicated to helping families of children with Down syndrome. So she's very involved in the Down syndrome
Yeah.
world of the part of Spain that she's in. And then she started working as a civil servant. And then she's elected to parliament. So these are all, I mean, this is an incredible step. It's, I think, as far as I know, the first person elected to like a national like government position with Down
Mhm.
syndrome. And our first, what Heather was saying is like our first thing when these sorts of things happen is we talk about them as a group and feel like we should touch on them as a podcast about Down syndrome and the progress that's been making in inclusion. And it's an interesting thing to consider that the only stories we get about the furthering of inclusion in Down syndrome are the ones about extraordinary people with Down syndrome doing
Mm.
extraordinary things. And so, you know, as a podcast, we're not we're not seeing articles about a boy who went to school and did his best that day, you know, like,
Right.
so this is what we have, right? And it does matter. It is important. The She is carving a path, and hopefully more people with Down syndrome are going to have opportunities in the service of their governments to take on these roles and positions. And then at the same time, what Heather was saying is we go, why does it take this extraordinary thing for us to talk about what people with Down syndrome are doing? And, uh, are we like buying in to this system that
Mm,
says you're valuable and you're important with Down syndrome if you're doing something extraordinary?
mhm,
And I think that is a really important conversation for us to have. What makes what how do we define inclusion? How do we define privilege? What does it mean for us as people who are trying to shift the narrative around Down syndrome to acknowledge and praise these wonderful people with Down syndrome doing extraordinary things, and also live into a way of seeing the world that values every person with Down syndrome, regardless of whether they're extraordinary in the eyes of the rest of society.
mm. That was a great overview, Micah. That was really helpful. Thank you.
Welcome.
It brings up so many things. Mercedes, what are you thinking?
I have so many thoughts in this. I don't know. I feel like I I feel like when I am not affected by these kinds of articles only because I look through it through my own lens too. Like I'm not a singer. I'm not anyone famous. I didn't do anything extraordinary. You know what I mean? And so I guess I don't put that also on my kids. Almost like it's like how spectacular Sunflower is right now and who she is. I just am not. I've never been too much of a compare. Not we're not comparing, right? But I'm not like that. That's not my thinking, my frame of thinking. So as I sit here and
Yeah.
listen, I'm like, oh, okay, I like these conversations because then it's like everybody is different in that way, right? And so then it's another level of understanding for me of how and within our community that could be felt, I guess is what I'm saying. So I'm like, so really I'm
Yeah.
kind of just taking it in what you're saying because I hear this and I for sure championing. I just don't I'm I don't compare, but
Would you say it'd be like the same as if there's a story about a young man,
yeah,
Rhodes age, who does something extraordinary. It's just like, "Oh, that's
exactly.
great." Like that's newsworthy, that's newsworthy. Like, however, when the newsworthy things come when you come across them, it's like, "That's amazing. She did an amazing worthy thing
Yeah.
as a person with Down syndrome." Let's Does
Yeah.
that I feel accurate? Just like you would with if it was one of your boys who doesn't have Down syndrome.
Exactly. Like, I just wouldn't yeah, like, I don't know in what scenario they would, Channel 5 News would be where we're at to, like,
Sure.
see the extraordinary thing.
Yeah.
So, I
Yeah, yeah.
think that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying, like, "Oh, okay, why I love these conversations because I'm like, okay, needs to be talked about. And I do think within our Down syndrome community, that can be a struggle. And I wonder if that's a struggle more because of social media and because of those kind of things that are in your face that make it, that have brought that tension more to the surface than it should be. Does that make sense? Like, I wonder if
Yeah.
that comparison feels that way because of things, because we do need our friends with Down syndrome who can speak well and be that leader in that space to carry those torches. And then we need, which are always my favorite, hometown leaders, just people within their household. I feel like greatness and
Mhm.
popularity is all measured eyes in the eyes of the beholder. I don't know.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, I hear all that. I think that's a really great perspective, and I the thing that this particular story and these kinds of stories bring up is the way that they're
Mm,
framed for me. It's a framing of it. I think that when you look at this woman, she she dedicated her life to civil
Mhm.
service. Like this is what she is doing, right? Just like you said, like, and this is not what most people
Right.
period do. And then she has Down syndrome, and that it is a beautiful and important representation
Mhm.
of inclusion. If this is something that is your skill set and this is what you can give your heart to and your life to, and this is what you want to do, Down
Right.
syndrome or not, or especially with Down syndrome, then you should be able to do that. This is a picture of inclusion, 100%. For me, where it gets tricky is, and this is all in all these stories for me within the Down syndrome space, is the way that we frame the bigger
Mm.
conversation. So outside of no, both inside and outside of Down syndrome, I feel like we're missing the gift that our kids with Down syndrome have give the
Mhm.
world, which is a lot of things. And for me, it has been challenging the idea of what gives a human value and
Mhm.
worth. And the way that my kids exist in the world as people with Down syndrome have shifted, if you will, all the narratives that I've had around what it means to be human and what gives a life value and worth. And I think that's the invitation, one of the major invitations of the gift of loving a person
Yeah.
with Down syndrome. But like all invitations, we have to step into it. And we live in a culture that says, well, in a world that says disabled people are
Mhm.
less human. And we live in a culture that says you have to do A, B, C, and D in order to have value and worth.
Mhm.
And and then we have like aside from talent, that piece gets tricky. But here, real quick, this was the thing for me with this particular story that was like, oh, why did we have to frame it this way? The BBC, which is a leading news source in the globe, posted did an article on her, which is amazing, rightfully so. But one of the quotes from the article is, "Society is starting to see that people with Down syndrome have a lot to
Mhm.
contribute." And that framing is
Mm.
problematic to me because what
Mm.
that's saying is if you are a person with Down syndrome and can do these things, then you have a lot to contribute,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the
Mm.
conversation's not being had about people without Down syndrome. No one's saying that to me. Like, if you can only if you can do these things do you have a lot to contribute to society. But that framing of of saying that people with Down syndrome have a lot to contribute, we can finally see it because of what this woman's doing. That to me is problematic
Mhm.
because my kids with Down syndrome have a lot to contribute by existing in a space. All people with Down syndrome have a lot to contribute by being a person with Down syndrome in
Mhm.
the world and
Yeah.
existing in a space. And they're not going to be they're not going to be doing these extraordinary things people with Down syndrome are doing. That is where it gets conflicting for me is
Yeah.
I'd like us as a Down syndrome community and as a larger society and as
Yeah.
humans to be able to see it, like frame it
Mhm.
that way. You know, yes, this is incredible and we will celebrate this. And there's nothing when I read this story, there's nothing in me that's like, well, dang it, Mason, I sure wish you
Mhm.
could do more. However, that's what
Mm.
society is saying. If Mason
Yes.
did these amazing things, then she finally she has something to contribute.
Mhm.
And that's so
Mhm.
problematic, in my opinion.
Yeah. That's I think amen. Let's
Right?
close this conversation down. You
Mic
got it.
drop.
Done. That Helen I was, like, going with the story. I was like, "This is amazing and beautiful," and have my own little weird things I'm working out in my mind when it comes to the bigger narrative around Down syndrome,
Sure.
but that line from the BBC and
Yeah.
that everybody's not, like, up in arms about it. I'm like,
Yeah.
"Wait a second, what does this say about people with
Right.
Down syndrome?
Yep.
What are we saying about this entire people group? They only finally, we can see that they have something to contribute."
Yeah.
What? Are you kidding? Do you know
Yeah.
every person that's been touched by my kids' lives have been changed forever and for the
100%.
better? Like, talk about something to contribute to the world. You get to be alive and exist with an extra chromosome in this world. That is your
Mhm.
contribution. And if you go further than that, amazing. Let's cheer all of the people with Down syndrome on who are making it, not making it, but who are doing what they can do best, right? Like
Right.
thriving in a world that's rejecting them. Let's cheer that on. Or finding themselves in spaces where they are the first ever to be there. That is huge
Mhm.
and amazing.
Mhm.
But let's call this what this is, friends.
Yeah. I feel like there's a couple of different ways we could take this conversation. Like we could talk about just what inclusion means when in a world that defines it the way that the BBC defined defined goodness of people with Down syndrome in that article. Like, finally, there's something to contribute, right? And then, or we can talk about like what exactly is
Mhm.
inclusion? Like, is it creating equal opportunities, or is it ensuring that everyone feels a sense of belonging in whatever space they're in? And what is it? What does it mean for us to like walk these two paths where we can like where we can celebrate and cheer on the extraordinary people with Down syndrome, and also realize that what what we want for every person with Down syndrome is to have such a sense of belonging that they can do what they do in a place, like whatever it is that the gifts that they bring to the world, they can do it in their spaces where they are and be celebrated and belong there.
Mhm. Yeah, be seen as fully human, like, that always comes back to it, where we went through this big thing with Macy in school, and she said, "We're no longer pursuing inclusion for Mason in school," which is another conversation, but, like, a lot of people are like, "What do you want? Like, what exactly are you after?" I'm like, "Oh, it's real simple. I would like Macy to walk in a room and be seen as
Yeah.
fully human. That is what I'm after. That's what I'm after, and not because she's now on the parliament. Like, no, because she is. So this is what
Mhm.
we're after, and then
Yeah.
how do we do that? How do we do that? And I think it's by telling a bigger story, like reframing the stories that get thrown out into the world.
I wanted to ask too, like, what would be, I feel like you girls, you ladies being authors and writers, what how could they have framed it better? Like, I feel like we know, but I want to give a better title. So they title that line you're hung up on. What could they have done better to create that inclusion part, you know?
I think the reframing is like, so this says society is starting to see that people with Down syndrome have a lot to contribute. I think it's almost like society is starting to
Mhm.
recognize they're lacking when they exclude
Mm.
people with
Right.
Down syndrome, right?
Right.
Like the problem is with the society, it's not with Down syndrome. So society is finally getting smart to the fact, or understanding and recognizing that they are better off when people with Down syndrome are included.
Right. And I bet that would have been a better clickbait for them because, like these titles and these things that they put out there too, it's just another version of what we've talked about in previous episodes of these clickbaits, right? And these like quick things that
Mhm,
frame a narrative like we're talking about. And you're saying, and which I think is very
mhm,
like telling is that, yeah, society, even, okay, so this brings me back to even when talking, I'm going to talk to their Sunny's IP team today, and even talking about the diploma track that I have for Sunflower in. There are new alternative diploma, high school diploma, like there's new things that have just happened within 2020, 2023. Society is so
mhm.
behind in finding the worth and intelligence of people with disabilities. And it's such a shame and it's so sad. So I get really excited for these kind of articles to come out about the people. And then I do wish they were framed with more honoring since she spent so many years getting to this point, right? And like that needs to be almost the header and the highlight of that. And it is wild to me how there's so much, like when I first read this topic that we were going to do for our thing, I think it also is like she didn't do this alone. She had a family behind her, right? And that's another element to
Mhm,
is it a privilege? Because I do feel like some parents have the capacity, the know-how, the money, and the voice, the status to help their child with Down syndrome achieve a goal or be better or take the right path or be greater. And
mhm,
I would be curious to know her support system as well, right? In this, because I feel like that's a big,
mhm.
I don't know, that's something to also I would wanna know as a parent to either because I always need some sort of encouragement to be that kind of support for Sunflower and whatever that pans out to look like for Sunflower. She might not be on Parliament, but she might, I don't know, be whatever she
Mhm.
wants to be. But I just there's always 2 stories that I really always wanna know more about. Like, I wanna know more about that person with Down syndrome achieving those huge goals and then their support system, because I really do feel like that's the beauty of, loving a person with Down syndrome is that it's a team effort and a family effort. And so I kind of went off a tangent, but
Mhm.
there's society, that
Yeah,
society part that I
that's
guess
great.
I'm not shocked and I'm saddened by, but I feel like these are the years we're living out the years of those cringy articles. We're living out the years. As
Mm,
I just think about even when thinking about women's rights or black rights, like there's just cringy articles that were in the past. And then you're like, oh, that doesn't fly anymore. You know, like we've now, now we
yeah.
value these people, feel
Mm.
human, and now we relearn our language. And I think we're just like having to like kind of feel the brunt of these cringy articles. You know,
Mhm.
we're living it in real time
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
because
living it
that's
in real time,
how
like it's happening. Mhm.
late, like we've said before, society is to this. We're not shocked. They're
Mhm.
shocked. But anyway, her family's not shocked. You know? They're
Right.
Yeah.
you
Right.
so
Right.
it's just interesting to
Yeah.
me. That's where my mind in this conversation keeps going to.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think I mean, I'm glad you brought up the idea of privilege, Mercedes, because I think there's a really important conversation to have around privilege in these particularly in these stories of like remarkable people with Down syndrome. Um, and how significant the support of family and the family having the financial means to give the person with Down syndrome the kind of whatever it is, the early interventions that are extra, the kind of education that they need, the opportunities, the connections, all of those things. And I think that that's something we're also living out in
Mhm.
real time. I, I think about from time to time, I will get a comment on my Instagram that will say, it's always from somebody I've never seen before on my
Totally.
Instagram, but it's always like, you know, I know you're just here trying to convince people to have their babies with Down syndrome, but you're rich and I can tell, and you have
Mm.
like, you can pay for all this stuff and don't speak for people who don't have the financial means. And I, I feel like that's a conversation I'm totally open to having with people on Instagram if they want to have it in a generous way.
Mhm.
Right.
And I'm not going to deny that there is a lot in Ace's life that I've been able to give him because I have the financial resources to, because my husband has a job that gives
Mhm.
us really great insurance, that, there's so many things that it's not fair what Ace can get that other kids
Mhm.
are not getting just because of the privilege that Ace was born
Mhm.
into. And yeah, how do you start
Mhm.
to have that conversation around inclusion and who gets to succeed? And
It is
it's tricky.
tricky, and one of the
Yeah.
talking points too, even funding in school systems and access, all those different privileges,
Mm,
or even like the fact
Mhm.
that for the most part, I mean, we all do different works, but our main work is to be stay-at-home moms, and we get to even take time to check in on other resources. It's even the value of time, and then
mm,
majorly, and then access. So
Oh, majorly. Yeah.
I've had, I think people don't really comment. They haven't really said the same thing to me, but they've alluded to similar things. And And it's fine, like, I don't take offense because even with homeschooling, it comes up a lot, like, "Oh, I don't have the privilege to
Mm.
homeschool, blah, blah, blah."
Yeah.
And there's major, major sacrifice, and I'm not here to convince anybody, but there's major sacrifice that me and Andy decided to make so that we can homeschool, right? We're
Mhm.
not eating all the cake and swimming in money, but
Mhm.
those are sacrifices, but not everybody gets opportunity to make that, even that choice to make
Mhm.
that sacrifice.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
I definitely think
Right.
that
Yeah.
there is
Yeah, definitely.
privilege in definitely in inclusion, because what may be offered to someone who's wealthier or her parents could pay for better support or who have better connections or more famous is not
Mhm.
going to be the same efforts I get or Sunflower gets. Do you know what I there of
Yep.
course there
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
different,
Yeah.
and it's a bummer because it even happens within our own community, right? And we see it. We get to see it on social media.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, I think it is like I think there's privilege in so many regards, and then there's inclusion, but that idea of when inclusion is actual privilege. And inclusion, we all know for however many years, a decade or 5 years or 50 years, I don't know, has
Mhm.
been a buzzword big time. And I think in just depending the setting you're in, especially in the education setting, I think it's kind of like a ugh, like a cringe word. People don't really want to talk inclusion in education. It's
Totally.
become kind of
Right.
has like a negative bend to it when it really shouldn't. But the idea that what inclusion is, right? The inclusion is as defined, I'm assuming by a dictionary, is the action or state of including or being included within a group or structure, or the practice or policy of providing equal access to opportunities and resources for people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized. So that idea always for me, inclusion comes back to the acts providing equal access and opportunities. And what I have experienced having two kids in an inclusive setting for most of their education, and as a person who knows hundreds of people with Down syndrome, all different ages, and watch my good friends and their kids, how they're experiencing inclusion is there is a privileged
Mm.
person who actually gets to be included, and it isn't something that,
Yeah.
it's not like feel shame about this. It's just the reality, right? We can't change something we don't name. So the fact that inclusion works for certain kids with Down syndrome, and right now I'll just talk specifically education. Certain kinds of kids with Down syndrome
Mhm.
are incredibly successful when it comes to
Mhm.
inclusion, and other kind of kids aren't. And it usually has to do with you can
Mhm.
be more like your typical peers,
Mhm.
that or you have this incredible support team. And it doesn't matter what kind of person you are with Down syndrome, you just have this great
Common,
support
yeah.
team, but I think the former is more common. So, that idea then it's like, "Well, wait a second, that's actually
Yeah.
not even a little
Right.
that's exclusionary inclusion." If everyone's not included, like, if everybody can't
Right.
experience inclusion, then is it inclusion? Or is there like, should it be a privilege
Right.
to be included? I think that's rhetorical. No, you shouldn't. Everyone
Yeah.
should experience inclusion. But I think that's what's happening in our
Yes.
systems. And I wonder, taking it full circle, and everyone gets so irritated at me, how much the way that we frame stories like this, right, has to do with why inclusion
Mhm.
only works for
Mhm.
certain kinds of people with Down syndrome. I don't know,
I know.
but I wonder. What do you think?
Absolutely. Because you can take that title, and educators are finally waking up to what people with Down syndrome can offer in the
Right.
classroom or something, like it's
Right.
if you turn it into an education statement, then it comes back to what can those children with Down syndrome offer in the
Mhm.
classroom. And if you can't offer something, if you don't have
Mm,
anything to give your peers, you aren't like able to participate in a conversation or keep your body from running around the room when everybody else is sitting still and answering questions, like there's then you're not offering something to the class. Your value, which most of the time in our culture is based on what you can
Mm.
do, what you're capable of, then
mhm.
you're not offering value to your typical peers and your
Mhm.
teacher. And therefore, you need to go to a place where
Mm.
you're your problems can be handled, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
I think so.
There's like 5 other episodes here, guys. I've been thinking so much on this idea. I've been thinking about this actually ever since my book Everyone Belongs came out. I have formulated some talks around some key points in that book, and this
Mhm.
idea of separate
Mhm.
spaces for certain people.
Mm-mm.
And separate spaces are not a bad thing, right? Like you can think of different people groups creating clubs and creating organizations and creating support where it's just like people who are in the room, like a separate space. And that there's a difference between
Mhm.
separating to honor and separating to other. And when we separate to honor, then that is a beautiful thing. That's incredible to get to do it. And we have kids in the disability space who need a separate space in an educational setting. However, the educational space is not separating people and denying inclusion in order
Mm.
to honor who they are as a learner. It's to other them. It's to stick them in a space, get them in another place, to other who they are,
Mm.
and make them an other in the community. And while inclusion, and now I have to use air quotes, I don't even know what that means. While inclusion is happening for other kids in the
Keep up
school
or fit in.
who
Yeah.
can fit in or whatever. Yeah.
I know.
What are we doing?
It's a
Or what do we
big
do? What do
beast.
we do here?
Mhm.
It's a beast. It's a beast. One of the questions in our script here that Ashley wrote was she says, "So, do you think this fight for equal access and opportunity will ever change with the current system of inclusion
Mhm.
Mm.
the way that it exists?" Like what because the burden for it, and this was also true for Mar Galsran. This is also true for her
Mm.
that the
Mhm.
burden of inclusion is on the disabled person and their support, their direct support system. And can we get to the point where people are included in an honoring way, or when they are put in there's a separate space, it's because it's honoring for them, not to other them. Can we get there the way that it exists right now, like working towards inclusion?
No. Like, it
What do
has
you
to
think?
keep evolving, changing.
Or what needs to change?
It has to change. Also because it's a system, and systems are meant to keep evolving and change. Like, they can't just stay
Mm,
stagnant, because I feel like, right, there's even new ways that we're finding to support people with Down syndrome from birth, right? There's just we're now like catching up to how to help support a whole people group. So I just feel like with everything continuing to grow, and access continuing to be provided, because it's trickling down. Not everywhere is, like we've talked about, is inclusive or giving opportunity. So it's slowly trickling down. I think that the system has to change and continue to develop, because now society is actually inviting people with Down syndrome in. And so now they're actually getting to be
mm,
voices within that
mhm.
opportunity, and parents are now paving ways, loved ones are paving ways, that are their voices are being heard in those systems. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, do you think that would you guys agree, and can you see that the burden for inclusion to work is on the disability community? Like, in order for inclusion to the fight for and making inclusion happen, that burden is
Unfortunately,
majority
yeah.
on people with disabilities and their
Yeah.
support system. And I guess the question I'm wondering, does that change? Like what's does that need to change in order for inclusion to actually work
There
for
needs to be
all?
more, I mean, heroes. There needs to be more people that join the team. I
Mhm,
mean, gosh, I don't know, I come with such a different perspective, just even being, like even as I continue my own journey, a woman of color, like, it was so important for me to graduate college, right? Like, it is my burden, even as a woman of color, to respect myself, do the steps, and, like, be a leader and do certain things. I don't know. I carry that burden, but I don't see it as a burden. I see it as an opportunity, my call to change. Like, and so I guess it's how you see it. Like, it's a bummer. And but then there's people that have come alongside me. Like, I feel like Micah and Heather, you're people that come alongside. So, right, that this isn't my lifestyle, who I am, my life is not your burden to carry, but you share the heart in it, especially Heather, you with True, like you share the heart in it. So I don't know. I don't see it as a burden. I see it as our I born responsibility. I don't know. Those are all could be hard to muster, but man, I feel like we're all fighting
mm,
for something, you know. My I don't know. I guess burden, I don't see it as a burden, but I could see how other people would see it as a burden. And I think it's a
yeah,
bummer
Mm,
that we have to carry it, but also it's an honor.
mm,
it's really good.
mm,
Do
I
you
like
feel
that.
like there is, I mean, I think I'm curious, Mercedes, when we look at like the the entire span of the civil rights movement and how slowly things have kind of moved, even though the people who have been moving it have been like fighting with all their might. And and then, some might
Mm,
say that the George Floyd protests in 2020 were like a tipping point, and that white people were finally like, "Oh, maybe we have some work to do." And and that they're and people can debate back and forth whether white people have done anything since then. Um, but I wonder, Mercedes, if you feel if that rings true to you, that they're like this is gonna be a slug to change people's perspectives on disability, and that it's going to be moving
mm,
real slow forward, but hopefully keep moving forward. And maybe it won't be this that maybe the burden won't be shared by all of the society by the time the three of us are
Mhm.
gone, but maybe it will be moving
Mhm.
towards that.
I think that's where I definitely see, I
yeah,
guess in
yeah,
my what you're saying is totally what I'm feeling, is that I'm not surprised about the slowness and like, I don't even
mm,
like the way we're talking about it. Like, I am seeing it of like almost like like you said, Heather, we are in real time in the rights movement for people with disabilities. These are the
Mm,
burden is on us, and that's not a bad thing. Like, I'm so honored and have been even before adopting Sunflower to
mm,
be an ally and come alongside people with disabilities. And I want to help carry that burden even before I had Sunflower, right? And like, I just feel like what an honor
yeah,
and a better quality of life for me to even have like that perspective and to be able to fight something greater than myself, you know? And so that's why I feel like I I
yep,
hope our
yes,
community listens to our podcasts and knows that the burden is, what is it? Even that biblical, what is it, girls? Like, the burden is heavy or light in the load. What do you know what I'm saying? I really wanted to be profound. Yes.
mhm,
My load is easy. My load is easy and my burden is
Yeah.
light.
Yes. Like, I just want us to, I hope that the love and like those moments of support help to relieve how long this road is and how many minds we have to convince and shift, and like thinking about post high school, because that's the realm I'm in, of like Sunflower's
Mhm,
adult years, and those adult years that are the there's less, like we spend all this time fighting for all this like
mhm,
elementary and like
mhm,
high school, and these are the moments where there are stuff in place for to keep my daughter busy and enriched and within community, and then that there's like so much less post, and we don't even get to really even like enjoy that fact. Some parents, or
mhm.
like some situations don't, and then you're like, okay, now they're out of high school, we survived the IEP, we fought with the teams, blah blah blah, and then there's this whole nother fight of like drought too.
Mm,
That's a different episode. But I'm just saying, like, it doesn't get easier,
Yeah.
and it is a heavy load, and it's a worthwhile one. And it's what keeps us on our toes and not taking for granted this life and living with a purpose.
mm,
Mm, it's great, Mars. Thanks for saying and sharing all that. I know there are just a dozen more things we could talk about. I think this really is such an ongoing conversation, and one that we've had a lot actually on the podcast in a similar vein of inclusion. And we've got, I don't know, there's 2 dozen episodes. We've done 17, 28, 40, 58, 64, 67, 85, 92, 101, 106, and on that all have this thread of inclusion because it is such an
yeah.
important
Mhm.
topic and idea. Finding belonging as humans is
Mhm.
like a human thing, right? This isn't even a Down syndrome thing. We want to know that we belong. We want to know that we can be in a space and be exactly as we are and find that sense of belonging. So listeners, we would love to hear from you. If you head over to, you can email us hello at the luckyfewpodcast.com, and then on Instagram, leave some comments. And we have a lot more
I
to talk
know.
about on this topic, but for now, we're wrapping it
Just to
up.
be continued.
No nice bows today. To be continued. I think what I'm saying to myself, and maybe this is helpful for other parents, is I like seeing these news stories is an opportunity
Mm,
to get to remember
Mhm.
just how wonderful our loved ones with Down syndrome are just as they are. And just like reminding, I just want to share the stories with my kids. Like
mm,
look at this, a person with Down syndrome in the
Mhm.
world in a way they've never been before. And guess what? You get to be in the world just like you are. And wherever you end up is going to be exactly where you're supposed to be. And I'm here
Mhm.
cheering you on. And I love you so much
that
because
sounds
you're
good.
a little slice of heaven and magic
That's I'll tell
in
them.
my life. So I'm going to tell my kids that today
Love that.
when they get home
Tell
from
all the
school.
kids.
To
Yes.
all the kids
Eh.
We
and
include
adults.
everyone in this message.
Everyone in the world. I love you all.
All right. We're going to take a little break,
Good
and
reminder.
then we're going to come back with all of your favorite parts of every episode of The Lucky Few. Good news.
Time for good news, time for good news. Everybody, welcome to the good news. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I got it. Oh, my darling, oh, my darling, oh, my darling listener.
Oh,
We have got some good news for you, and you're bringing some to us. It really would have been better to rhyme listener with her, but it
Micah
just didn't
had
seem
some
right.
really good little dance moves. Okay. That's okay. That's right. Okay, you guys, listeners, we have one slice of good news today that is worth 100 good newses. And that is we are
Woo,
going
woo,
to
woo.
be live celebrating our millionth episode.
Woo!
Friends, Micah, Mercedes, and I are going to be in San Diego, California on March 8th. and every single one of you is invited. We would love for you to join us for a live recording. 2 things, live recording of an
Woo!
episode and a celebration of our
That's amazing.
1 millionth download of this podcast. Isn't this amazing?
1,000,000!
Amazing. So we would love for you to join us and be a part of the fun and the celebration. You can go to theluckyfewpodcast.com for tickets. You can go to heatheravis.com for tickets. You can go to our Instagram page, Lucky Few Pod, go in the link. You can go to Lucky Few Official in the link for tickets. Possibly Mercedes and Micah will have a link in their pages. Just keep looking for us. Click on the link. It is going to be a very fun event. It's going to be a little bit intimate. There's going to be we're going to be toasting with adult beverages. That's exciting. It's very soon, friends. Grab your tickets today. We cannot wait to celebrate. How many downloads, ladies?
1 million. Amazing.
Can you even wrap your head around it? 1 million
I
downloads.
haven't even ever counted to 1 million.
So
That
many
is not
things
one of
to do on this
them.
earth, but that is not one of them.
Nope. I definitely know what number comes next at any point. Throw out a number between now and 1 million. I can tell
I
you
will
what's
not
next. However, I'm not
exclusively
punching all
count
the way
to that number.
No.
Oh, that's so good.
No. But we're so excited. I'm excited to be together with you ladies, and it's my absolute favorite thing to get to do. And I love being with our community. So listeners, we hope to see you there. Until then, we're going to wrap this episode up. We are going to have merch for sale at the event, but if you need something ahead of time, theluckyfew.co, you can go there, use code podcast and get 10% off all of your narrative shifting gear. And thank you to Josh Avis for editing this episode and Ashley Braccolossi for producing it.
And if you like this episode, share it with your family and friends, and don't forget to subscribe.
And did you know we send out a weekly newsletter? Yep, every week. So sign up and get early access to events like our live event, wink wink, merch, and lots more. Head over to heatheravis.com to sign up.
Also, you can check out theluckyfewpodcast.com for show notes. We'll have links to all the episodes that we've talked about, a similar conversation. Very different. Every episode's different, but in the vein of inclusion. And you can, any links that you want, you can head over to theluckyfewpodcast.com to the show notes. And then you can also go to social media at the Lucky Few Pod. Make sure you're following along there because we're really fun there.
We're super fun. And speaking of fun, you listener are fun. And also,
right.
Even if you're not fun, you're slaying it. And we love you either way. We're cheering you on. We can't wait to be together next week.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
We just sit there, 155,393.
Like the longest episode ever. I have never counted to 1 million, nor will I.